I mean, what do I even say? This episode was nothing short of Holy shit. Invincible Season 3 Episode 7 has arrived, and this episode is no doubt going in S tier when I update my episodes tier list. This episode was intense, sad, violent, and once again left us on a massive cliffhanger. But before we get to all the juicy content I know you all want, be sure to hit the like and sub button if you enjoy this video. The last episode of Invincible did super well, and I'm very grateful you all enjoyed it so much. But that's enough formalities. Let's talk about Invincible Season 3 Episode 7. What have I done? The episode gets going immediately in showing us how Angstrom survived and his, injuries. I still, for the life of me, do not understand how this man survived with his entire face blown open. But he had some technician surgeons on standby, and he crawls through a portal, and they fix him up in exchange for some kind of deal. And many months later, we see him commanding the evil alternate versions of Mark to go and wreak havoc on our Mark's world. But before our Mark gets word of all the destruction unfolding, we see him at Eve's house, and he's still all messed up about the business with Scott. It's really easy to tell just how beat up and defeated Mark is after the whole Scott fiasco, and Steven Yeun's performance really enhances this moment. Eve cancels dinner that they were gonna have with her parents and states how problematic and terrible they are. And Mark is quick to point out that he, of all people, knows just what terrible parents are like, and the two have a nice laugh, and, they just laugh it off like a good couple should. Then they get a call from the prison, and the havoc and invasion of evil Marks begins. The evil Marks hit the prison, they hit LA, they hit New York. Hell, they even hit the freaking Kremlin in Moscow. And holy moly, these dudes are unhinged as hell. Up in space, we see Mustache Mark duking it out with a fan favorite character that no one thought was gonna be in the show. Tech Jacket. Everybody release the confetti for Tech Jacket. Yeah, I didn't read the comics. I know absolutely nothing about Tech Jacket beyond what my loyal viewer T-Tops has told me. But if what T-Tops told me is true, then Tech Jacket's gonna be a pretty fun character to have on screen. While all this is happening, Rex is helping Ray move into her new apartment, like a real good man should. And as they're talking, Rex admits that for the first time in his terrible, miserable life, he's kind of in a good place, and that's kind of weird. Then the destruction finally reaches them and Rex suits up. Ray suits up as well, but Rex insists that she can't unquit on her first day of quitting, which I think that's just such a Rex-splode remark. You can't unquit, you just quit. Ray kisses him good luck, and with a stylish exit, Rex says that he'll be right back. Yeah, you guessed it. That's foreshadowing. Over at the prison, Mark meets Mohawk Mark, and this Mark is one screw loose of a screw. They duke it out for a bit, and our Mark, I'm just gonna call our Mark Mark, and then I'm gonna think up of funny nicknames for all the other evil Marks, okay? Mark does get beat down a bit, but he does manage to get the upper hand and knocks Mohawk Mark out for the moment. And then Kid Thor, as well as some other heroes, come along and think that Mark is one of his evil versions, and they start beating the crap out of him. And of course, Scott gets in on the action since he's free from prison now, and he tries to solo Mohawk Mark. Okay, someone please count how many times I say Mark in this episode, and if you guess correctly, I'll pin your comment. But meanwhile, at Mark's house, Oliver is getting suited up and getting ready for his first big mission. Debbie tells him not to come back to the house because one of the evil Marks is probably gonna go there, and Debbie decides she's gonna go stay with Paul while this whole thing unfolds. So while Debbie goes to Paul's house, Oliver heads into the action for his first real taste of what actual superheroing battles can look like. Back at the prison, Kid Thor and the other heroes realize that Mark is the good Mark, their Mark, the one they all know and love. They help him deal with Mohawk for the minute, and thank God they came to their senses about Mark being the good Mark, because if they didn't, and Mark was constantly dealing with people thinking he was evil, he would have had a much rougher time this episode. Over at the GDA, Cecil's noise weapon and Reanimen take out one of the Marks, and Donald, the absolute cyborg legend, points out that this Mark seemed to be weaker than their Mark. Cecil declares they might have a chance and tells Donald that they need to make some calls. To everyone. We see Oliver being a proper hero and saving lives, and then he thinks he sees his brother, but it turns out to be Smoothhead Mark. Meanwhile, Mark and Eve are surveying the damage, and Eve says that they need to figure out who's doing this, but Mark has already pieced it together, because there's only one person who could possibly do this. Then they run into Bandana Mark. I'm sorry, this costume is so goofy. They run into Bandana Mark and they start beating the crap out of him. And meanwhile, over in the desert, the Immortal is dealing with Wide-Eye Mark. I'm sorry, I'm trying so hard with these names. Wide-Eye Mark almost gets possessed by that stupid spirit in that tomb that we've been seeing like every season. And it's like, yeah, he's never getting out of there. He's never getting out of there. Then we see the evil Mark who I've placed all of my bets on. A Mark I have dubbed Invincible Supreme. And he's duking it out with... I don't actually know who that is. It kind of looks like that lizard woman with the claws from the Lizard League, but, you know, man. And Invincible Supreme says that he killed his dad and that this guy stands no chance. Look, I know he's a sadistic fuck, but that outfit combined with that confidence and just not caring what anyone thinks about him makes him such a badass. Can we all just be real for a minute? I'll say this now so you're not disappointed later, but we don't get to see Invincible Supreme duke it out with our Mark, unfortunately, but every second he is on screen is just, yes. We also see long hair Mark for a second or two, and seeing a version of evil Mark with a near identical head of hair that I myself used to have, it makes me feel like I'm being included. But our Mark and Eve are giving Bandana Mark a run for his money. That is until Omni-Mark shows up. Yeah, he's definitely up there with Invincible Supreme just because of this one line.
Swearing doesn't make you cool.
And then Eve makes this really quick save by pushing the two away and just... oh, these fights are so satisfying to watch, you know? But the save doesn't last very long because Eve ends up getting hurt. Luckily, it's not fatal, but it's still a pretty bad injury. And then Omni-Mark proclaims that he always hated Eve. Yeah, I take it back. Omni-Mark sucks. If he doesn't like Eve, he sucks. With Eve injured, Omni-Mark states that Mark can't fight them and protect Eve at the same time. Thankfully, and I mean thankfully, we got Cecil with the mad clutch. I know Cecil fucked up at the start of the season, and we're gonna get to that a little bit later on, but thank God his priorities are just still saving the world and saving his heroes. And Donald, the absolute legend, decides to be a hero himself, stating that he can do more out there with his cybernetic body than he can do in there.
You're just gonna get yourself killed, Donald.
That's what I do, sir.
Oh my God, he's so fucking cool! At Guardians HQ, we see Wide-Eye Mark kicking the utter crap out of the Guardians and the Immortal. Also, don't worry, Shapesmith isn't dead, but he doesn't let Wide-Eye Mark know that. He might be a bit of a dum-dum, but he's smarter than he looks. Wide-Eye Mark is pretty up there on the sadistic scale, if you ask me, because after he decapitates the Immortal, he says,
"Man, I always do this. I kill them too fast and then it's over. No torture, no screaming, no fun."
Jesus fucking Christ, kid, you need help. You need like decades worth of therapy. Or better yet, a sneak attack from Darkwing. Yup, the new Darkwing goes full hero mode too, and he traps Wide-Eye Mark in the Shadowverse. Granted, Darkwing is probably dead, but it's a bit ambiguous, so there's still the potential for him to pop out at any random time. Over at the college, William almost gets crushed by some falling rocks, but thanks to Rick's rockin' hot cybernetic bod, he manages to save William. I'm gonna be real, if they killed William this episode, I would have started a full-blown protest outside of the Invincible writing room. One of the evil Marks actually ends up going to Mark's house, and he tries to lure out Debbie by sort of begging for help. But when that doesn't work, he states that he would have loved to kill her again. You know, all these sadistic Marks really put into perspective how special our Mark really is. The fact that he goes this bad in so many other dimensions truly makes what Art said in Season 2 just so true. And that being that Debbie raised a good boy, and without her and the way she raised Mark, the planet would have been dead like so long ago. So I want to see some love and appreciation for Debbie down in the comments, because she's a real hero too. Okay, I've been putting this off for as long as I possibly could, but it's time to address what happens at Teen Team HQ. Pale Mark weeds out Rudy from his suit and is confused as to where the little troll guy is. I guess Rudy doesn't make himself a new body in most, if not any other dimension. Rudy screams at Bulletproof to get the rest of their friends out of there, especially Amanda, but he doesn't listen and he comes to back up his friends anyway. And then, like a supergiant star in the vast darkness of space, Rexplode tells Bulletproof to get Rudy and Amanda out of there. Rex says that he has a plan and everything will be alright. But you can tell he's lying. Rex solos Pale Mark. He makes the entire floor erupt in a massive explosion, and he even manages to damage and scratch Pale Mark and damage one of his goggles. But of course, Pale Mark gets the upper hand. Rex is out of ammo, he's out of time, he's out of options. But he's taken Pale Mark down with him by exploding his own skeleton. With one final blaze of glory, Rexplode takes down Pale Mark, saves his friends, and helped save the world. God, man, why did it have to be Rex? I mean, why? Like, seriously, why? I can't deny this is a satisfying end to Rexplode's character arc. He goes from selfish asshole to selfless hero who puts others before himself. But it's gonna hurt to live in a world without Rexplode. No. Without Rex Sloan. And after the fact, we get a short montage of all the carnage that's happened thus far, and in the middle of it, we see Mark at the GDA at Eve's side as she's recovering. Cecil insists that Mark needs to be out there, that the world needs him, that his brother needs him, that his own mother needs him. But Mark doesn't care. He wants to stay by Eve's side to protect her because he knows full well one of the evil Marks could come there and kill her to try and get at him. Cecil points out that Mark will have to explain himself to Eve whenever she comes around, but Mark insists that he's staying, and the only bit of advice Cecil can offer to Mark is that, I hope you don't regret this. Up in space, we see that Tech Jacket has taken out Mustache Mark, and whoa, he doesn't even have a scratch on him. I'm glad he's coming down to the planet now, because they're gonna need him. Angstrom calls all the evil Marks back to him, and it's here we learn something pretty interesting. They made deals with Angstrom to conquer other dimensions. At least, some of them did anyway. Masked Mark said he wanted to find his mom and bring her home, and Maskless Mark says he missed William. So not all of them are completely rotten to the core, some of them just have rotten branches. But they all agree unanimously that they're done doing what Angstrom says, and they're gonna torture him until he does what he promised. But Angstrom pulls a sneaky and sends all of them to Desert Future Horrible Planet where Angstrom died the first time. And for the moment, that's the last we see of the evil Marks. Again, little sad we didn't get to see Invincible Supreme and our Mark duke it out for a little bit, but, you know, it's a small thing. I don't really care that much. Back at the GDA, Cecil informs Mark that they have found Angstrom. And the way Mark looks at his mask when Cecil asks him, "Are you sure you want to sit this one out?" Holy shit, dude. I could not have scripted a better example of show don't tell even if I tried. Mark gets teleported to Angstrom's location and he goes all out, and he doesn't hold back. He is dodging portals left and right. That is until Angstrom whips out the drone swarm. And on the note of a scene where Mark is flying around, I haven't said this in any other video, but I love the sound design for when people are flying in this show. I mean, even when they're just doing takeoffs and stuff. Like, here, just listen. God, it's so crisp and satisfying. Either way, Mark has got the mad dodges in this fight, and he doesn't get pushed into a single portal. But Mark does get grounded, and then Angstrom whips out the Mega Swarm, just thousands and thousands of these little drones pushing Mark back. All the other evil versions of Mark got yeeted into a portal just by one of those little things, so seeing our Mark resist thousands of them, it really shows how strong he is. But Angstrom runs out of drones, and Mark manages to get him by the throat. And Oliver swoops in at the last moment to be like, kill him, Mark, you have to kill him, you have to finish him off. And throughout this season, we've seen Oliver struggle to understand why killing is bad, but in this instance, Oliver is completely right. Angstrom needs to die. Mark declares that he has no choice, and Angstrom retorts that those were some poor words. One last drone gets a sneaky hit on Mark, and Angstrom escapes, only losing an arm. But this is no victory for Angstrom, since the technicians who rebuilt his body have full control over his new body. Angstrom failed to keep whatever promises he made to them, and now Angstrom is essentially their slave. And honestly, that might be a more fitting punishment for a villain like Angstrom Levy. Death is an easy punishment for mega villains like Angstrom, but having his own words come back and bite him in the ass and he kind of ends up sentencing himself, that is justice. After we see more of the carnage accompanied by some news reporting, we once again see Mark in the hospital with Eve. And Mark expresses to Eve how his mentality about killing Angstrom has completely changed. Mark was torturing himself about killing Angstrom. Like, let's just be honest, he was torturing himself about it. But now Mark expresses and feels that he wished he did kill Angstrom. All he can think about is how he wished he did kill him. Cecil comes in and agrees with Mark. Yeah, he should have killed him. But then, in my eyes, Cecil does a whole lot of redemption with just one sentence.
You can't blame yourself for being a good person, Mark.
Honestly, Cecil, I couldn't have said it better myself. Cecil is actually pretty good to Mark here, and, you know, considering their current standing with one another, Cecil's pretty supportive. Supportive in his own Cecil kind of way, of course, but still, it's nice to see Cecil giving Mark the respect that he should have given him in the first place. Cecil tells Mark that they could really use some help in New York, and Mark does go because he does want to help, but he makes it very clear that he's not working with Cecil once all this is over. And of course, to add salt on the wound, Mark runs into Scott in New York. Of course, Scott tries to jump him, but Mark and Oliver hold him down and let him wear himself out. But as Britt is taking Scott away, he screams that
he caused this! Every dead body you find is a person he killed!
Mark doesn't protest or even disagree with what Scott is saying, and we see later in the hospital how he's expressing to Eve that Scott is right. All of this is on him, because if he had killed Angstrom, none of this would have ever happened. So Scott is technically right in this scenario, and like, man, when a guy like Scott, someone messed up as that, is right, you know we're living in a pretty fucked up world. But Mark admits how he just doesn't know what he's going to do now that he's realized this about himself. Eve's parents then arrive, and Eve's dad very politely and very respectfully tells Mark to get lost. But as Mark is leaving, Eve's mother actually takes a minute to go and talk with him, which I think was really nice of her. They don't know that Mark is invincible as of yet, and honestly, that's probably for the better right now. There is no way either of Eve's parents would feel safe or comfortable knowing that their daughter is dating Invincible. Eve's mom talks about Valerie, who was Eve's childhood friend from the Adam Eve special. Apparently Valerie died during all the attacks, and Eve is still alive because of her powers and abilities. And because of Mark, of course. But Eve's dad doesn't let their conversation continue much longer, and Mark is left alone to think about this innocent girl who died because of him. It just cannot get any worse for Mark. His heart can't take much more of this, man. As the Pentagon is being rebuilt, the Immortal is revived, and he declares immediately that he's done. And he also declares that he wants to start a family with Kate, so I guess that's the last we'll be seeing of them for now. But Multi-Paul is still out there somewhere, and I bet whenever Paul is dealt with, we'll see Kate and maybe the Immortal one more time. In Cecil's office, we see Britt, Bulletproof, Shapesmith, Samson, and of course, Mark. As Cecil is going over the damage, he says that he wants Mark to lead the Guardians. Mark pushes back, of course, and he says he isn't qualified for the job and he won't work for Cecil. And Cecil gives Mark honest-to-God props for standing up to him, stating that that means something. But Mark still refuses, and he walks out to go help with the rebuilding. And the last time we were in a scenario where Cecil and Mark were walking out of his office, it didn't end very well. This time, it's different. Cecil says to Mark that if he needs someone to talk to, he'll be there. Mark says that Cecil is the last person he wants to talk to right now. But before Mark leaves, he does say,
But thanks.
Baby steps. These are baby steps for these two to not be mortal enemies anymore. Cecil even says that they're still on the same side and, quote, they're still the good guys. He doesn't give his usual quote about good guys or guys saving the world, and he tries to appeal to Mark's views and values. Maybe Cecil's views about his famous quote have changed, especially given everything they've just been through. So I think, with time and work, Cecil can redeem himself for his actions. Maybe not be forgiven, but he can do better. And just as Mark is helping out with the cleanup and the rebuilding,
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
holy shit, it's him. He's here. He's finally here.
You don't understand. All this is my fault. So the only thing I want to do right now is hit something as hard as I can.
Good.
Talk about a cliffhanger. Just when Mark is at his lowest, his greatest foe so far has come to challenge him. And Mark is sick and tired of all of this bullshit. Conquest isn't his enemy. He's Mark's punching bag. And I have a feeling Conquest is going to regret pissing off. And that, my friends, was Invincible Season 3, Episode 7. What have I done? Man, Mark is brought low this episode, and I mean brought low. His alternate evil selves destroy his world, injure his girlfriend, kill his friend Rexplode, and they tarnish the good name of Invincible. Mark blames himself for all of this happening because technically, yeah, it is his fault. And it doesn't help that Scott is there to add more salt on the wound. But it is paramount in storytelling for our heroes to be brought low. It is important for us to see them get crushed, stepped on, and hurt, because it paves the way for them to rise higher than ever. And with how low Mark has been brought this episode, when he rises, he's going to rise as one of the greatest heroes ever. Now let's talk about some extra things and scenes that I really liked in this episode. There's this one scene toward the end where we see a concrete wall at the Teen Team base where Rex took down Pale Mark. And on the wall is a silhouette of Rexplode, the last imprint of a great man who saved his friends and helped save the world. Rex dying already kind of destroyed me on the inside, but seeing that silhouette was just the last nail in the coffin, man. I legit, shed a tear or two when I saw that. I also really liked Oliver in this episode. This was his first real test of heroism, and I think he did a pretty damn good job. Now, you could make the argument that him intervening when Mark had Angstrom by the throat at the last second is what allowed Angstrom to escape. That's valid. That is a valid statement to have. But honestly, I don't think Angstrom flat out dying and being murdered by Mark would have been the right call, at least from a writing standpoint. I think his own words writing his sentence for him and his own broken promises sentencing him to a lifetime of slavery is far more befitting of a mega villain like Angstrom. And as I was talking to T-Tops about this episode, he said that some other Invincible review channels who've talked about this episode already had some pretty, L takes. Mainly with certain scenes being too short and kind of just popping out of the blue. And yeah, characters like Tech Jacket and Brit and Wolfman did kind of just pop out of the blue. That's not incorrect. But they're going to be expanded upon and explored more in the next season, and maybe even a little bit in the next episode. These are some of the new heroes we're going to be seeing as we approach kind of the quote-unquote end game of Invincible. And seeing them show up during a critical crisis like this already tells us a lot about them. This way, when we learn more about them, we're going to be like, oh shit, this guy's awesome. I'm glad he was there to help out with the invasion of evil Marks. There was also this sequence at the beginning of day 3 where it flashes between all the different evil Marks and the destruction they were causing. And just look at this scene. The way the fire in their eyes doesn't change, but what's around them do. God, that is metal as fuck. But to sum up my thoughts, this was a fantastic second to last episode of Invincible Season 3. Good action, good writing, satisfying conclusions to character arcs, and of course, Conquest showing up at the last minute to keep us all hooked for the finale, baby. But if you enjoyed this video and want to stick around to hear my thoughts on the finale, then definitely be sure to hit the like and sub button. Also, for those who've been wondering, since, yeah, this video will be out before then, the long-awaited 10 and I guess 11K special is coming out on Wednesday. But if you really like the way I do things and you want to show me a little bit of extra support, then definitely consider becoming a channel member. Not only do you get a whole bunch of exclusive rewards, but you also directly support me in the process. And I've just appreciated a whole bunch. But that's gonna do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.